Hello, friends. We're back with episode 167 of the Our Weekly Highlights podcast. This is the weekly show where we talk about the awesome resources that are shared every single week on the Our Weekly issue. My name is Eric Nance, and I'm delighted you join us from wherever you are around the world. And yep, we are in June already. It's hard to believe, but almost midway through the year. So, as usual, I can't do this shindig alone these days. I am joined by my awesome co-host, Mike Thomas. Mike, how are you doing this today?
Doing pretty well, Eric. I've been paying attention more and more to your favorite sport, hockey. I know your Red Wings aren't in it, but Canada could have the cup coming home for the first time in a long time. Shout out Connor McDavid's goal the other day. That was incredible, if you haven't seen it, for any sports heads out there. And my local Boston Celtics are in the basketball finals, so that's pretty exciting over here. But other than that, it's all data science all the time.
That's right. And yeah, the nation of Canada is going to have this kind of carrot dangled in front of them once again for the first time since almost 2006 for that team. Who knows? Who knows? They're going against a mighty tough Florida team that was there last year, and they got an education, and they've been on a mission ever since. So it'll be a fun one to watch for all you hockey fans out there. But yeah, congrats to your Celtics. I think it is their year. I would have put a lot of stock into what they've learned over the years, so it should be a fun final.
We'll see. I gotta see any of the sports probabilistic models out there. I gotta see what they're saying.
Yeah, it's good. I think it's going to be kind of a toss-up depending on how hot that certain Luka gets on the Dallas side. But it's going to be fun to watch nonetheless. But in any event, we're going to hear talking about all sorts of things of R and data science today. And our curator for this episode, or this issue, I should say, is John Calder, another great contributor in our Weekly team. And as always, he had tremendous help from our fellow R Weekly curators and contributors and members like you all around the world with your awesome pull requests and suggestions. And we lead off today with a great post about if you've been using, say, the tidyverse line, your data science analytics and other work, and you've been starting to harness those principles in maybe a new package at your organization or making some functions that are consuming data sets as their main input. This first highlight today is a great primer for how you might want to make your functions a little more compatible, so to speak, with the main building block of the tidyverse data processing object type, albeit the tibble. And this post comes to us from Hugo Grusin, who is a research software engineer in epidemiology. And he leads off this very succinct post with motivating the situation. First, a bit of those of you that aren't aware, the tibble is what you might call a reimagination or a slight update on the typical data.frame object in base R, which of course holds your rectangular style data. The tibble does a little things under the hood to not so much replace data frame, but to add some either safeguards or more kind of quality of life enhancements on top of it. The biggest one that's obvious to you, especially if you've been a veteran of R for a few years, is that if you have a large data frame and you print that in your console, you're probably going to have a wall of text just spitting down all throughout because it's going to print that whole thing. Whereas a tibble has a modified print method, where it's only going to show you the first 10 rows or so, and then the names of the columns. So hence, it's a good way to kind of get a quick glance at your data set without overloading your console. That's just one of the minor differences. But we're going to talk about some differences under the hood that could affect you if you're writing a function that takes a data frame or a tibble as input. And in case in point, there is a big difference here, and that's the first part of this post here, is that when you subset for a column, like a particular column of observations in a data frame, when you look at that under the hood, you will get a vector right away if you use the bracket notation of the name of your data frame, the opening bracket, a comma to say get all rows, and then either the name of the column or the index position of the column. You will get a vector of those observations right away. With a tibble, not so much. With a tibble, if you do that kind of notation to grab a column out of it, you're actually going to get a one column tibble back instead of a vector. That can be a bit of a problem if you're going to make a function that does some kind of like single column selection, and that function, like in the example here, a mean function, is expecting a vector of observations, not a one column data frame. So his advice in this first example is that you can't rely on that single column subsetting having that default behavior of a data frame of what we call drop. Drop meaning like drop the data frame class and go straight to vector. Don't hedge your bets on that, so to speak. So in his example, he explicitly mentions or explicitly states a parameter in that bracket style subsetting of the column with drop equal true. Then you're guaranteeing that no matter if it's a data frame being fed into this function or a tibble, that you will get that one column back as a vector of observations, a vector of numbers, instead of that one column data frame. I have been victim of this in the past when I was writing some packages that, albeit didn't use tibbles in their main package code, but then I was using tibbles as a way to put some nice kind of convenience functions on top of the pipeline. And that drove me nuts when I just wanted one variable instead. And then suddenly these functions I was doing that was doing like p-value derivations was just spitting errors at me because it was getting a data frame inside. Like, I couldn't believe it. Sure enough, I was running into that little mini inferno about the drop situation. So sage advice here from Hugo on that, because I think that trips up a lot of people when they're starting to make functions that are using tibbles as an argument instead of just the data frame itself. But that's not all, Mike, because there's another concept that admittedly both you and I have never really paid a lot of attention to, but that could wreak havoc on your function as well.
No, you're exactly right, Eric. And I just want to go back to your topic really quick. I think anybody who's probably ever developed an R package has been bit by this drop equals true versus drop equals false behavior, where you're with a sort of plain vanilla data frame, you're getting a vector out, and with a tibble, you're actually getting a data frame out instead of the vector of the values of the column that you're looking for. So if you haven't been bit by it yet, this is one to watch out for. And another one to watch out for, Eric, as you're alluding to, is the concept of partial matching, which I must have seen, somewhere along in my journey, but I do not remember this, and it's blowing my mind that this is even a thing. And what we mean by partial matching is when you're using the $sign operator on a data frame to extract a particular column from that data frame. And we'll use like empty cars as an example here. If you say empty cars $S, it will pull out the speed column because it's going to use partial matching to try to guess which column you were referring to. And you don't necessarily have to specify exactly the name of that column to get it out. To me, that's mind-blowing. The fact that we can do that, I'll be totally honest with you, I don't think I really like that. It does not feel safe to me. I'm surprised that it still exists. I'm assuming it still exists in our 4.4.0. The latest release, maybe it's 4.4.1 that's out there now. I imagine that this was something that was implemented in the early days of R, thinking that maybe it's a good idea. We want to make this language and the syntax as user-friendly as possible. But to me, oh man, it gives me the heebie-jeebies and makes me feel like there's a lot of more opportunity for disaster to strike here than there is for efficiency to be gained. But the idea along this section of Hugo's blog post here is definitely do not rely on this partial matching idea. I don't know too many people who do rely on it, but if you do, it's something that you should certainly watch out for. You can actually set some options, if you'd like, in your environment to ensure that partial matching, can't take place. And one of these options is the warn partial match $. argument, which you can set to true in your .r profile file, for example, which will essentially ensure that you get at least a warning that a partial match is taking place, and that warning will appear in your console. You can do the same thing. You may want to do the same thing in your test that folder, so that your unit tests throw an error or a warning, at least give you that flag if there's partial matching going on that you're not necessarily expecting, which I think can be a great idea. And if you do really need to support partial matching, obviously this partial matching concept is only implemented on the vanilla data frame side and not necessarily implemented on the tibble side, but you can manually handle it. And Hugo gives an example here of using the char match function, char match function, to be able to sort of fuzzy match, partial match a column name that you're looking for, and sort of have the same exact user experience as you would have with this partial matching against a pure vanilla data frame within a tibble environment. So there's a nice little code chunk here if you're interested in doing that. But again, this is just my opinion only. We're full of hot takes on this podcast, and my hot take today, I guess, is be careful of any partial matching that's going on. And I think this is a great blog post in general to just warn you about some funky behavior that can take place between data frames and tibbles that you may or may not have been privy to. And it's definitely something that could easily trip you up in a script that you're writing or a package that you're writing. So it's great stuff to look out for. Hugo also alludes to and provides a link to a longer vignette that contains all the differences between tibbles and data frames, and I think data.frames. And that vignette is from the tibble package itself. One of the fun pieces about this blog is that Hugo continues to use the phrase compatible, which is a really nice pun that rounds out this blog post, I think, beautifully. So great top to bottom summary of these sort of two funky behaviors between data frames and tibbles, and I definitely think it's a good reminder, warning to those of us out there to be on the lookout, stay vigilant for these differences.
Absolutely. And even had I known about partial matching back in my very early days of using R back in grad school, I probably wouldn't touch it with a 10-foot pole. I am just one of those people that errs on the side of caution, errs on the side of verbosity and specificity, and I'm going to put the full name of that variable no matter how long it is, because in the end, there are many ways in programming, not just in R, but in programming in general, to just whack yourself silly with, user-inflicted issues already. Last thing I need is partial matching to wreak havoc. And I do think it's kind of you might say I don't know if relic's the right word, but it's a snapshot in the history of R and S itself, because let's think about what was not around when R and S were built. We didn't have modern IDEs and modern frameworks that would support auto-completion in an intelligent way. Like if you're looking at a tibble or looking at a data frame and you want to get the name of that variable and you start typing the name of the data frame, $, and start typing the name of that variable, the modern editors like RStudio and even some of the plugins you get in VS Code and whatnot will let you auto-complete the name of that variable. So you don't have to really rely on partial matching in those situations, because the IDE is going to give you a helping hand to help complete that full name. And also within the tidyverse itself, packages like dplyr, tidyr, and many others, under the hood, use a package called tidyselect that will let you grab related variables based on maybe like the prefix of their name or maybe their position or other ways to intelligently search for these. And again, what you'll get back is the full name of the variable. It's just a convenience way for you to get there. So certainly I think the modern tooling and the modern principles in the tidyverse hopefully make it that you don't have to support partial matching. But if you have some legacy projects where you do, this post has definitely got you covered on those as well. And then also Hugo throws some interesting nuggets at the end here with respect to testing. If you have to really rely on data frames and tibbles being, jointly supported in your function, he has some ideas and some resources that you might want to use to help make that testing more efficient. He has some plugs for both the Patrick R package, which lets you do parameterized tests with teststat, which I didn't know about, as well as this auto test package. And that is basically a way to help scrape your R packages, like example code for like your functions, and then intelligently or dynamically, I should say, kind of change inputs to kind of do some, test generation based on that. So 2 little nuggets there if you want to really be robust with not just equipping your functions for the support of tibbles and data frames, but also helping yourself as a package author to test for these differences in a more systematic way. These 2 packages could help you out quite nicely there. So lots of knowledge dropped in this short post here. Rounding out our highlights today, we've got another great showcase of the power of the Quarto documentation engine with a use case that'll be very nice for those of you in the educational sector or building maybe internal R trainings that want to leverage this novel technology. And we have this highlight coming from the esteemed Nicola Rennie, who is a frequent contributor to the R Weekly highlights in the past, and she talks about her solution that combines the concept of parameterized reporting in Quarto with dynamic and conditional logic inside your Quarto document itself to hide or show certain pieces of elements. And the use case here is that she wanted to create exercises and tutorial material for her students to work through in a workshop session. She's actually taught many workshops that have been shared in the R community. I still want to thank Nicole once again. I thanked her many times before for her awesome workshop on machine learning at last year's R Pharma. She did a tremendous job with that, and she built the materials using Quarto, so timely here as well. But in case of this example that she's talking about here, she had a set of goals that she wanted to achieve here, is that the document would have a series of questions that the users would have to, write some R code or use R to help answer. And then a companion document to this that would have not just the questions, but the solutions to the exercises as well. Again, very familiar concept to anybody in the educational sector. And this approach would not just work for web-based formats, but also work for static formats as well, such as PDF output. Hence, if you have to do like a paper version for whatever reason, don't ask me about why I've been looking at static outputs recently. We'll save that for another episode. But in any event, the first part of this post talks about what are parameters inside a Quarto document. If you used R Markdown before, this will actually sound pretty familiar to you because it works basically the same way. In your YAML of a Quarto document, you can have a field called params. And then inside it, you can have a series of one or many of these what look like key value pairs, only they're variables. So you might give it a name like year, and then in colon, after the colon, you give the actual value of that. So you could define as many of these as you like. And then this is supported both with the Knitter engine as well as the Jupyter engine. So no matter if you're on the R or Python side, you can use parameters just as easily in each framework. And this has been a hugely helpful technique, especially if you're doing automated reporting, maybe on a ETL or another processing pipeline where you've got the same report, but it's changing like a subset of the data, or it's changing a key variable, but yet the rest of the outputs are going to be generated in a similar way. Parameterized reports are a great way to make that happen. So in the case of this tutorial example, she has a parameter called hide answers. And the default of this is true, meaning that in the document, it's going to be one document. But here's the kicker, is that in the document, she has put what we call these fenced identifiers around the type of output that will only be shown if one of these parameters is set to true. So she has this in a very interesting way with both the answers being shown as well as if you're doing PDF output to only show when the output format is PDF in the case of when she renders it. But this is all combined very nicely in her Quarto chunks of the code where she's going to dynamically put in whether to put in these fenced identifiers of what they call content hidden based on an inline R code snippet where if that parameter of hide answers is true. This is genius here. I love this technique. In fact, I was literally thinking to myself, how could I do this with a Quarto dashboard to do certain styling elements or certain pieces of the card, styling if I had a parameter that was like longer length than another one. This is the key to make that happen. An inline little snippet that says if params $hide answers, then put in this fence div of content hidden, and then you can still have the answer in one place. It's all in one document. She didn't make separate documents for this. Hence, we're applying the dry principle here, right? Don't repeat yourself. Don't make a separate document just for one snippet. This is terrific stuff. And then in the end, you see an example where one printout of the screenshot is asking the question, and then another printout with hide answers false is showing the actual R code to help achieve that answer.
Yeah, it's pretty incredible. And I would say that Nicola is probably one of the leading voices on all of the different gymnastics that you can do with Quarto, and especially when it comes to, not repeating yourself, making things as reproducible as possible and making things as easy on yourself as possible. And this is another fantastic walkthrough. And I do just want to, before I forget, thank Nicola for these many Quarto blog posts, which have honestly helped me and saved me hours in a lot of the Quarto work that we do at Catchbrook. So in the conditional content section of her blog post, she leverages, again, one of these sort of fenced divs, and you're able to specify, when a particular format is being rendered to take this action. So the best place to take a look at this is in the blog post, but within this fenced div, she uses the .content hidden argument followed by the when format argument, and specifies when format equals PDF, then the content is going to be hidden. So it's a pretty powerful little utility that we have in Quarto to be able to take in a conditional action based upon the type of format that's being rendered to. So very, very useful, I think, especially for folks who are rendering documents to different formats, because let's be honest, sometimes when you're rendering to HTML, some element of your Quarto document is going to look really nice, and when it gets rendered to PDF, either it's going to break or it's just going to look terrible because, they're two completely different formats. Maybe you're taking advantage of, some HTML content that, really only belongs on a web page and doesn't belong on a static document, or vice versa when it comes to PDF. So this is a really powerful little argument within this fence div that we can create that I think is excellent. And then maybe the last thing that I'll point out is, that there are multiple ways to render your documents. One is from the command line, which is, a utility that I'll use quite often as well. But if that render call gets a little bit lengthy, for example, maybe you have a few different arguments that you're trying to specify, one maybe being the output file name, if you want to rename that file something different than the naming convention that you used for the .qmd document. Maybe that's something that you want to specify. Or if you have parameters, you can use the params flag of that command line call. Alternatively, you may want to use the Quarto R package itself and leverage the Quarto render function and specify these different arguments, a little nicer than this really wide command line call that you might have to be making if you are trying to set these different flags and specify these different arguments and output file names and things like that. So at the end of Nicola's blog post, before the additional resources, she has two code snippets for how she rendered, the questions that she created, as well as the answers document that she created in these two different R calls using the Quarto render function from the Quarto R package, which you may be interested in taking a look at. And the only difference between the two is the execute params argument is specified such that, for the questions, hide answers parameter is set to true, and for the answers, the hide answers parameter is set to false. So that second time that she knits this document, the answers will be displayed. So she'll create, two different documents here, which is fantastic, and a great, top to bottom run through on how she went about doing this, all the different considerations and options and fence divs and parameter options that we have in Quarto to make things as flexible as possible. Not only across, two different outputs that she wants to create, but even multiple document types. So great walkthrough.
Yeah, and echo your gratitude and thanks to Nicola for these terrific resources, because I was able to use some of her previous materials as well that combine principles that we see in this post here for my recent our consortium submissions working group efforts, where we have a document that we have to send as part of this bundle that we transfer to regulators. We call it an Analysis Data Set Reviewer's Guide, or ADRG, and I wanted to try something different with this. I could have taken the typical route and just do a Word document, type it all verbatim. It was like, no. We're in 2024. Let's do something better here. So it's a Quarto document, but it's got two formats, because as much as I'd love to be able to submit the HTML format, we can't really put that in the bundle. So we do a PDF as well. But we do have conditional logic throughout some parts of the document that we know that for PDF, it's not going to quite render as nicely with the default font size. So I'll do some code chunk updates based on the output type. And in that way, I have a preview version of the ADRG linked on, an HTML static site hosting area. And then the reviewers can look at that, as they give me comments and whatnot. But then the actual bundle that we transfer to them, which will hopefully be this month, we will be able to supply the PDF version. And it's going to look, very good, very polished. But again, the source is all from one place. We just have conditional logic on top, but still preserving the majority of that source going to both output types. So I do think this is a very novel concept, and parameters can, we just scratch the surface of what is offered here. At the end of Nicola's post here, she has links some terrific additional either blog posts from Mike Mahoney or J.D. Ryan's recent parameterized Quarto reporting workshop that she gave for our ladies a while back. There's some great additional learning material. And I can't stress enough how awesome it is to have like a data frame of like parameter values, and each row may be a different configuration of it. Just do a per walk of that for each row, run Quarto render. You got your outputs all generated within about 10 seconds. I did that yesterday, and it was a thing of beauty, my friend, just a thing of beauty.
Music to my ears, Eric. I love nothing more than the per walk over that nice little data frame with all your different parameter configurations. Oh, thank you.
Yes. So once you combine all this stuff, it's like, I always equate it to being like a chef that can actually cook, because I'm not a chef that can actually cook very well. But with programming, I like to think I can mix and match these quite a bit. But I'm certainly not alone. We're learning from Nicola and many of the other thought leaders in this space here. And it never stops learning when you look at the rest of the R Weekly issue. And John has done a tremendous job for the rest of the issue here. So we'll take a couple minutes to talk about our additional finds that caught our attention for the week. And going back to the concept of tibbles and concepts of like the building blocks of the tidyverse, there were some great posts that were illuminating a concept in tidyr that I did not know was possible. There are a couple posts here from Lael Letri on the use of a tidyr function called packing versus the concept of nesting, which we often hear about more fully with respect to creating your tibbles. And if you're like me, when you first saw this issue, you're thinking, packing? What is that? Well, you can think of packing as like a slightly different take on how the data frame is being collapsed. Nesting is kind of like doing a row-based collapsing. You're going to have maybe a set of columns that become their own tibble, but it reduces the number of rows in your data frame as a result. We often do this in group by processing and whatnot. Packing is kind of taking the opposite approach. it's going to keep the same number of rows, but then it's going to make a tibble out of various columns, and then you can unpack it to make it wider again. And so these two posts are going to talk about the comparisons of the two, when you might want to use one versus the other. And in particular, I mean, I still have a lot to learn in this area here, but she did illuminate some interesting examples. If you have JSON type data, why you might want to look at packing versus nesting in those concepts. So again, just an illustration that I always think I know most of the tidyverse, but there's always something I don't know. So we're all learning together on this. But Mike, what did you find?
So I found that the GeoArrow package, I think, has its first release on CRAN. It's version 0.2.0, which I am super excited about because I am a huge proponent of the Arrow package and the Parquet file format. And we are getting some utilities in R to be able to wrap the GeoParquet project, which allows you to work with GIS data that's stored in Parquet format for just huge efficiencies over, traditionally, large, heavy data sets when we talk about geospatial data. One more blog I want to shout out is a blog from Athanasia Mowinkle, which is called Customize Your R Startup Message. And it's a really nice little walkthrough about how to give yourself a little message, if you'd like, when your R session starts up each time. So a really cute little fun one for anybody interested.
Yeah, we need a little variety in life, right? I mean, I have all my friends in the Linux community that do these fancy shell prompts and startup messages for their servers. I'm like, I need some of that for my R work. So yeah, well, that post is gonna have me covered there. So yeah, and awesome congrats to the GeoArrow team, because yeah, we're seeing immense innovations in the world of Parquet with spatial data. So this is just another tip to the hat, and yeah, what a great time to be part of that ecosystem. And it's a great time to see the rest of our weekly as well, and for you to get involved as well, because this is not a project that's just run by a few individuals on the whims. This is based on the community, for the community, and by the community, if you will. So the best way to help us out is to contribute to the issues directly via your suggestions for new resources, new packages, new tutorials, new workshops. We are fair game for all that will help the R community. How you do that? Every issue at rweekly.org has a link in the top right corner for the upcoming issues draft. You can just click that, and you'll be taken directly to the pull request template, where you can put in Markdown syntax, that great link, that great resource that you found, all Markdown all the time. We live Markdown. We love it. Hence, Quarto's been great with Markdown as well. So all just a pull request away to get your resource in the issue. And also, we love hearing from you in the community as well. We have a few ways to get in touch with us directly, one of which is in this episode's show notes. We got a link to the newish contact page that you can send us a message on there. And I did hear back from a listener that wants to do some interesting, I guess, meta-analysis on our past show notes. I'm going to, that's going to be exciting. So I'll definitely get in touch with you about that. And also, you can also send us a fun little boost in the modern podcast app if you're listening to, say, Podverse, Cast-O-Matic, Fountain, many others in this space. You can send a little boost directly in the podcast app, and we'll get that message directly to us without any third-party middle person in between. And speaking of podcasts, I guess I had a busy couple months recently, because I was on another show recently hosted by my good friend Barry at Podhome, talking about my adventures of podcasting and data science, and I'll have a link to that in this episode's show notes. That was great fun to join Barry on that episode. So I will link to that from the About Podcasting show. That was great fun. And also, you can get in touch with me on the social medias these days. I am mostly on Mastodon with our podcast at podcastindex.social. Doing a lot of fun dev work now behind the scenes with the Podcasting 2.0 stuff and getting real gnarly with JSON data. It's been a fun learning adventure, to say the least. I'm also on LinkedIn. Just search for my name. You'll find me there. And sporadically on the WeaponX thing with at the Rcast. And Mike, where can the listeners get a hold of you?
Sure, you can find me on Mastodon at Mike_Thomas at fostodon.org, or you can check out what I'm up to on LinkedIn if you search Ketchbrook Analytics, KETCHBROOK.
Awesome stuff. And yeah, it's been a nice, tidy episode. But I think, judging by the fact that I have kids at home, I got to get myself out of here. So we're going to close up shop here in this episode of our Weekly Highlights. And we thank you so much once again for joining us from wherever you are around the world. And we hope to see you back here for another episode next week.